All right. So basically, what I want to share with you is something that's actually new to me, and it's the concept maps. I had heard of concept maps before, but this time I tried it, and with asynchronous learning method, it turned out to be quite empowering, and it's quite useful not only for my students but also for myself. So before getting anything, I want to actually share my screen and show you the end result. Basically, the concept maps come at the very end of lessons that I have. So I have these PowerPoints which I turn into video and I use as H5P, and you might see that later today in some of the other presenters, what H5P is. But basically, it's a way of communicating the lesson asynchronously. And at the end of that, I bring these concept maps to wrap up. So I'm going to show you a couple of concept maps that I made for my lessons. I teach economics again. And I have the instructions also about how to engage students with them. So I have to enable this sound also so that you can hear the narration. All right. So this is the very first concept map that they get to see at the end of their first lesson. So this is fairly early in the course, and then later on it goes up. There are 11 concept maps or 11 lessons. So I kind of prepare the grounds and set the rules the first time. So let's just see how this one works.
Let's summarize today's session through a concept map. If you haven't done concept maps before, they are a smart way of putting everything together. So I'm going to show you how it works. I'm going to show you one example of it. And later on in the course, you're going to have to create your own version. Okay, so today we talked about resources. That was a main concept. And they are limited compared to our outputs. Okay, and because of that, we must make sacrifice. Right? So notice the arrows here. The arrows show sequence. And then there's a little description, which is basically a sentence that you read, okay? And this sacrifice is called opportunity cost. If you graph this in a graph, we can represent it through the PPC, okay? And then when the PPC shifts outward, it's because of technology, which is called growth, and that growth will enable us to achieve more output, okay? We also had another concept called free lunch, and that is it's something that ignores the idea of sacrifice or opportunity cost, and it only happens if there is unemployment or inefficiency, and unemployment is when the resources are not used. Okay, so the one concept that I would say is most central here that you really want to get is opportunity cost, so that would be emphasized. So pause here and draw your concept map. If you like, you can draw your own version. It doesn't have to be symmetric. It doesn't have to be neat even. I have like kind of limited space here, so you have to put everything together in a square. What I would say is if you want to copy my version, that's fine, as long as you make one change. Okay, so you have to change something. Either you can change the wording of something, or you can add another concept in the lesson. Or change some of the arrows. Okay, so make one change of your own, so be creative with it. You need to pause here and think a little bit. Concept maps need a little bit of thought, but they are an excellent way of putting everything together as a summary. Okay.
All right, so that's notice that I asked them to not simply copy what I say but make one change, and then in the next lesson they have to make two changes. And I tried to do different types of it. It was really enriching for me also. Let me show you just one more. This is what they did this week. It's a little bit different, so it's a little bit further into the course.
So today we talked about the four sectors: household, firms, foreigners, and government, which all spend on GDP. That's the aggregate expenditure. If you divide it by the population, you get the standard of living, and the GDP is the same as the national income. After taxes, it becomes disposable income for households, and the taxes itself becomes the government revenue, right? And the households, they can save, and part of their saving, if they save money, then it practically becomes funds available for the firms to borrow. The parts that I would emphasize here are the households and firms. These are the two sectors which are super important when you want to analyze the economy, as we see in the future lessons. Notice that I don't have imports here. Part of it is because imports are distributed among all of the 4 sectors. So pause here and draw a concept map for yourself. What I would say is that you can draw your own. If you want to draw mine, you must make one major change. And major change isn't just changing the words. It should be either changing the shape of it, so you can keep the concepts but change the shape, the way they are related, or some other major change. So try to be creative with it. It might take some minutes to think about it, but it really helps your learning.
All right, so let me stop that. That took me actually, some of these concept maps took me about 1 hour to make. One of them took me actually more than 2 hours to make. So I do realize that it can be challenging for students, but at the same time, it's a very nice way of putting things together. And I asked them to submit the concept maps before the test. So this is not for grading or anything. I just want to make sure that they see that they're being rewarded for it, so they get completion marks for submitting that.